Hello everyone, Ian Pollard here. This is Teach Now Module 5, Unit 3, Activity 1, a presentation on formative assessments. The standard that I chose for this assignment is from the state of Florida, Department of Education Mathematics Grade 5. And basically, students have to be able to add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators. And here's an example of what they have to do. So in a general case, this is what they should be able to recognize, the process of using this equation. They should also be familiar with the terminology like this. They should be able to recognize real-world applications. So what are formative assessments exactly? They're basically tools used by teachers in order to give feedback to students immediately. And these things can also be used as a guide for their lessons. So, for example, if a student is really not getting something, then this lets the teacher know so that they don't move on and build upon the student's troubles. So it really improves on student attainment overall. These assessments are not used for grading or to judge a teacher's performance in any way. So the first assessment I would use to test this standard would be one called Write 3 Things. Basically, students have to write 3 things that they think their classmates might misunderstand about the concept. So basically this gets them to recognize the key elements of the concept, and hopefully things like what the numerator is, what the denominator is, and the idea of finding a common denominator. So the rationale behind this is similar to what I just explained. If they're able to identify the key elements, then this shows that they have a good level of understanding. If they're not able to do that, then basically there needs to be some kind of change of direction. Either the teacher can review or the students can somehow practice to get more understanding of the material. The second formative assessment that I decided that I would use is mini whiteboards. The process of this assessment is basically the teacher would write an example up on the board, and the students would write down all their workings and all their steps in the process to solving the problem. And in the end, students would hold the whiteboard above their head to show that they understand, or show their answer to see if they understand. The teacher then would look at their answers and be able to know right away which students are getting it and which students are having problems, and actually they should be able to pinpoint the very location in the process where they're having the problem. So the rationale behind this is pretty straightforward. If you do this a couple of times and you see the students are able to produce correct answers on their own, then obviously it shows that they have understood the material. And if the teacher sees that the student is making a mistake, maybe it's just a careless mistake, like putting a wrong number in somewhere, or making a wrong calculation, or maybe it's a mistake in logic. So the teacher should be able to pinpoint where exactly the student is making the mistake and correct it. The third type of assessment that I decided I would use is it's kind of a combination of 3 other assessments: fingers up, and then text the answer and teach it. So the first kind is fingers up. Basically you would go through the lesson and give the students a few examples, and then when you're near finished, you would ask the students if they understand, and they'd have to put up their fingers to show their level of understanding, 5 being that they understand it really well, and and 0 being that they don't understand it at all, they're completely lost. So that would be the first step. Then I would give the students a couple examples, maybe like A, B, and C, 3 different examples on the board, and I would assign some of them to answer those examples. And that's the text the answer exercise. So what students would do is they'd work out the problem on paper, and then they would text the answer to me, and I would immediately be able to tell which students are getting the answer and which students aren't. And then that leads to the last part. Basically, the students that are getting the correct answers, one of them would be selected at random to come up and show their whole process of solving the problem, and explain it to the class. In the final step, like I said, the students become the teachers. And then at the end, you could test it again, asking the students if they really understand. And you could do the fingers up method again. The rationale behind this, I know from my own experience working with math, understanding comes from doing a lot of examples. And math is really step-by-step procedural kind of subject. So understanding the process is a really important part, and you do that by going through a lot of different examples. And then this is what leads to complete understanding. Differentiation. Assessment number 3. Another thing that you could do to kind of accommodate students that have different learning styles is to give like a real world example of adding a fraction, and show them the process that you would go through in adding a fraction, but in a real world situation. So that is while the student, maybe the student that you asked in part 3, he's coming up and working out the problem on the board. The teacher could give a visual representation of the problem. So for example, if we have 1 over 9 plus 7 over 10, you can find the common denominator, which is 90, and then the numerators would change to 10 and 63. This can be represented using a beaker. You can put a piece of tape on the beaker and show the students at 90 milliliters, that means 1. So 90 milliliters over 90 milliliters is 1, for example. And then you put 10 milliliters to represent 10 over 90, 63 milliliters to represent 63 over 90, and then you dump one beaker into the other, and you come out with 73 milliliters in one beaker. And this is a visual, real-world example of adding a fraction. This benefits different types of learners. It also helps them establish meaning and relevance in what they're learning. Alternatively, you could get the students to go home and think of real-world examples of adding fractions and then present that to class. Students would be in control of finding an example and also how they would present it in class. So this could be a very difficult task for someone who decides to challenge themselves, or very easy for someone who's having trouble. They might just take the easiest route possible. Okay. So a summary of formative assessments. Basically, teaching mathematics, as I've been saying, is all about teaching process. One small error in logic or calculation is what often leads students astray. Formative assessment is a really great method of making sure the students are on track and making sure that students have complete control of the process. Each step of the process, you can do a formative assessment to make sure the students are getting it, and that will lead them towards understanding the complete concept in the end. That's it. Thanks a lot, everybody.